Call to order the Assembly Work Order on Title 11 and amendments for today. We'll begin by going around the room and introducing ourselves, starting with you, Ms. Tucker.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Amy Gambosky, Assembly.
Bill Starr. Ernie Hall.
Dick Training Assembly.
Tim Stevens, Assembly.
Jennifer Johnston.
Patrick Flynn.
Chris Birch.
Miss Bray Jackson.
Yes, Ms. Spray Jackson is
Getting
here.
lunch.
She's getting lunch.
Hi, Andy Tierney, Chair of the Anchorage Transportation Commission.
Municipal Clerk, I have one request to the folks sitting in our U. The boiler is the fan is very loud back here, and it's really hard for people in the audience to hear. So if you could please speak up and project, that would probably help. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Trainee has headed this project up and brought it to us for action, and he is going to be running this meeting today. So, Mr. Trainee, you are in charge.
Oh heavens. Should be fun. Does everybody have a copy of this handout I gave you, Assembly members? This are the comments from both Brennan and Coffey relative to each of the amendments. Rather than you have to call them, I had them send us a copy of their views on the amendments. So everybody's got a copy? Okay, I've got more copies.
I'll go in.
Okay. So what we're going to do is go through each amendment by the sponsoring Assembly member. The purpose is not to debate these, it's just to get the information out. I do want to get the feeling though on each one of the amendments from Eric, from you, and Mr. Tierney, because you guys have looked at them. I want to know what you think from your perspective. So Jennifer, we'll start with you with your A1.
This is basically, and it's actually Ms. Gambosky and myself. And this, one of the concerns for taxi cabs is Girdwood and Chugiak Eagle River and the lack of service. And it's been a he said, she said kind of situation. And so we would like to make sure that either Girdwood or Chugiak Eagle River is a member of the board, so that when the
So the composition would be one from Eagle River, one from Chugiak, Girdwood area?
yes.
Either or.
Well, one is for representation on the commission is for Girdwood and Chugiak Eagle River, one either or, and the other would be a non-voting member from the other.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments from Assembly members? Because we'll debate this tomorrow night. I just wanted to let the sponsor get their point of view on it.
I'm just reading ours.
Jennifer,
Uh-huh.
on that last amendment, the intent was not to have both the senior and or disabled and or Chugiak Girdwood. Both of those would be non-voting, or just one of them? Wasn't one of them going to be voting?
Right, the one was going to be voting, and it would be an either or from either or one of the communities.
From either Girdwood or
Right.
Okay.
Anything else, Jennifer?
Okay, so we're gonna have to amend this, we're gonna have to change this slightly, because it says further down in here. Oh, yeah, this last sentence, the transit director and or his designee shall serve as an ex officio member of the commission. Oh, I don't have, this is the most current one.
So,
Yes.
Mr. Trainee, in the amendments here that the clerk has prepared and that I reviewed also, we had a misunderstanding. So all of these are listed as ex officio non-voting members. And so I think that in this amendment, as it goes tomorrow, it should read, the commission shall include one ex officio member with knowledge of the needs of the disabled or senior community, and one member from either Girdwood or Chugiak Eagle River. So the ex officio as a adjective for Girdwood and Eagle River should be deleted from this packet, right?
That's what you're looking for, Jennifer?
Well, yeah, I'm looking
This is
at
what
the
you just
comments.
handed me when I was
You're
here.
reading the wrong one.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm on the wrong one.
she's on A.
You're on the first one, which is mine. I'll pick up mine later, A1. You're looking at
Okay,
A,
sorry,
which is
we
yours.
had a little confusion down here.
Sorry.
That said, Mr. Basti is correct that A does not do what you asked it to do.
Right.
It says one member from either Girdwood or Chudiak and one member from the disabled community. Or senior.
Which is our amendment, the second one.
Right.
I'm looking to see.
That would be explained.
I think we can
Anything
discuss,
else?
we can discuss it, move on from that one. Thank you, sir.
Anything else, Jennifer? Okay. Let's move on to B then. That also comes from Amy and Jennifer.
This amendment will essentially allow those that bring passengers in from the MATSU to return the same individuals to those areas.
Jennifer, is that the way you understand it?
Yes, I'm just reading also the comments.
Would they have, you said they could return them back to the Matsu Valley. Could they then harvest Anchorage fares while they were waiting, or would they have to wait there?
It would be the same, no, it would be the same fare. It would be the same person. Let's put it that way.
Question from assembly members? Okay. Moving on to C, again. You guys are busy.
Yeah, so this one essentially will delete the requirement that only those that have been practicing or participating in this market for fewer than 2 years. So it'll basically give opportunities for new people to come in.
Is that how you understand it?
Fire
Yeah.
permit.
Just opening up the market.
You guys want to wait till the end and then make your comments on the amendments, or what do you two want to do?
It's really, it's up to you, Mr. Training. However, are you guys going to distill your comments at the end, or really?
Might be easier to, as we're going through, to give our comments.
Let's do it as we're going through. Let's pick up C, we'll go back later and get B and A. Tell me about your view on C, letting new people into the market.
We wouldn't have a problem with this amendment at all. The Assembly in 1997 added a provision at that time that they have at least 2 years' experience in one market, just to ensure that there's some familiarity and what have you. But all this does is make it more opportunistic for those that may.
So you've had no problem with it?
Yeah.
Anything?
As long as current standards and review process remains in place, it's easy.
Anything, Amy?
No, sir.
Okay. Moving on to D. Either one of you two.
My thought is that while there's still the Lincoln Town Car or whatever it is with the posit traction, that those still are pretty effective.
In order to work with you two, I will delete my requirements for front-wheel drive, if that makes you any happier.
I
Thank you.
think as new cars come along, that they will be all-wheel drive.
I agree with that, but I won't mandate it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, was it an excuse that they couldn't service some areas because they didn't have the access?
It was
to
a safety issue because the front-wheel drive cars work better. Eric, have you worked with front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive vehicles?
Well, we just look at the service aspect of it.
Okay.
And the single biggest times of the year, and the cab is done when it's snowing. And one of the largest incidents of accidents is when it's snowing. And we've been doing a lot of research, and we think that because we have some very stable drivers that live and reside in Anchorage and made it their whole long term, and we have a segment of the operating aspect of the transient. They just come up and they sort of move, and they don't have that experience. And oftentimes where accidents occur, where the service shortfalls come, or in the upper areas of from Abbott Road south, and as you go up the hillside, and from those areas of Highland Road, and get up around some of the Birchwood, Peters Creek areas where they're not. It seems to be an issue. And accidents have continued to rise to where we're just under one a day in the wintertime. So is it because the rear wheel drive, or is it because of driver experience or not?
Bill?
It's okay.
Amy? Jennifer?
I feel that it's a non-issue.
Amy?
I'm good, thank you.
Let's look at E. Again, you guys are really busy. I gotta get down here ways to find somebody else.
Part of the impetus in moving this one forward is because in the Chugiak, Eagle River, Birchwood areas, we've had so many stories of non-responsive calls. I'd like to start data trending, and this will give us one more opportunity to get real data as far as non-responsive calls, so we can focus our efforts more if needed.
Jennifer?
Yeah.
From your perspective? Eric?
Well, from our perspective, this really, it doesn't help us. It doesn't hurt us, it doesn't help us. The way the system works generally is, when somebody calls for a cab, it's documented in the system. The way that you tell whether that call's been satisfied is they turn the meter on. They responded to the call, they turn the meter on, and the computer recognizes when the meter's turned on, and also that elapsed time, whether it's 10 minutes or an hour. We can see it, and we can see when that call's been fulfilled. We monitor that. We look at that, we look at our disability issues and just our general non-responsive issues, and we got the data as it is.
Does it cause a problem by doing this?
No,
Okay.
it doesn't cause a problem.
Any other questions from assembly members?
Well, do the computer reports generate a discrepancy report, like an automated report where they could say, these went unsatisfied? Have you working knowledge of the dispatching programs enough to know that?
We do that. I don't have a sample with me, but that is how we request it. And we ask for that. The number, especially with the disability committee, we want the number of requests for the month, the number of unfulfilled requests, the number of canceled calls, which that means anybody that makes a call, and then the number of complete.
So that process you're talking about right now, is that embedded in code already?
No, it's generally what's in code is they provide the information we request.
Right, so this actually strengthens what you can request. You can ask, we could call it something specific, but in this case, we're asking for a report that was unresponsive. So this kind of empowers your ability to go in there and say, print me that discrepancy report. That is the way I read it.
That it does. Yes, sir.
And it doesn't force them to keep a clipboard on the wall and all that. It's an automated function. Okay, thanks.
Any other comments? Yes.
Yeah. Does that mean that that these reports are generated from the system, or are they hand done by each dispatcher?
They're generated by the system.
Okay. The computer system spits it out.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Any other comments from assembly members? Okay. Moving on to F. Jennifer, Amy, which one?
Again, oh, sorry. Again, we're trying to create accountability and collect good data. So this is one more opportunity, especially focusing on the disability community. We want to ensure that if there's a delay over 30 minutes, we want a reason why. So hopefully in the future, if it becomes a trending problem, we can focus on why.
Okay. From your perspective, Eric? Mr. Tierney?
Well, I probably have two concerns with this from what we've heard at the commission. I think Andy could elaborate on that. Anything that gives us inputs of why services are being provided is sort of a good thing. but there have been some substantial increases in subscriber rates of the dispatch companies in the last couple of years. And what they have come and testified and cited is, of course, more onerous or more required activities. And so we get the information, and the previous amendment also accomplishes the same goal, because, except for one thing, the reason. Now, with that imposing is a manual exercise probably, and I'm not sure it helps us. Because an operator could give any reason of why they didn't take the call, they went, it becomes an excuse kind of thing among hundreds of folks. And so I'm not quite sure this one gets us there, with what we're trying
May I ask a question?
Yes, Amy.
Would this give us the opportunity if, for example, the reason was maybe there's only one disability permit on the street or one disability accessible vehicle on the street at the time, or 3 or whatever, would this bit of data give us an opportunity to see maybe there's more of a need for more of those types of vehicles or permits on the road? If people are telling us, well, I was the only driver for Checker that day that had this type of vehicle, so I had 2 other calls, and I had to finish those 2 calls before I went to this call. Wouldn't that give us a little glimpse into maybe a need, a shortage that's not being filled?
Through the chair, actually, we get that already. I mean, so it's another one. It's another one that we get. If that call is just not satisfied, we get it. So we know we have a shortfall. And the first thing we look at is how many did we have on the road? How many were there? What their activity level was during that time of request for service. The Eagle River Chugacker's in a zone, it's like 270, and so we can run a report from every call that came in from that area, and then we can, again, look at the same thing. Was the call satisfied, was it not? Was it canceled, which means if you made the call, you didn't get a cab in 2 hours, so did you cancel it? Or was it unfulfilled, and why? And then we take that, and we call in the operators, we look at the trip sheets, and then we look at the dispatch data for that operator when we see that, in this case, the disability cab, which ones are on the road, and we back right into it. And we want that rationale of why you didn't take the call. If we show that you were signed in and available for a call, and it didn't, and we would cite it.
Just one follow-up.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you routinely look at people that are delayed over 30 minutes, or is it only based on complaints?
We don't have the resources to look at it just generally. We're largely complaint driven. They didn't get a cab, then we go back and we look at it. And usually if it's a disability, it's usually been several hours or things of that nature.
So you're hearing about the people that have been waiting for several hours, but you may not have heard about the 20 people that waited for an hour or 45 minutes because they didn't complain.
That's correct. We don't.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Tim?
Yeah, all the reports in the world don't do you any good if you don't have the time, effort, or inclination to look at it, analyze it, and do something about it. And so I'm hoping that with the increased staffing that we were talking about, that could be a routine, and not just based on complaints, but also just to see how the system functions.
Andy, anything?
Well, Mr. Steele's right. If we do have the 2 additional enforcement officers, then more things are certainly possible. The commission, Eagle River, Girdwood, that was kind of the lightning rod to get a lot of this started. And we've always been sensitive to singling out Eagle River, Chugiak specifically. So if I think we would be fine with if asked, is to make sure that we know where the trips were, because if there are underserved areas, they may not be limited to Eagle River, Chugiak, but maybe some other areas that don't get the service they feel that they deserve. So whether it's by zip code or by there may be a way to do it. I'm trying to walk through the process, given the disconnect between the dispatch companies and how that might all work. Maybe the simplification of just the location of the origin of the trip might allow us to then distill some of this information at a later date.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from Assembly members? Okay, let's move on to G.
This amendment essentially will retain the current fare structure rather than increasing the cents per mile. It'll keep it at 25 cents per mile. That way we're not disproportionately raising the rates just on our rural communities and those who lie further out. That was the thought process.
Jennifer, anything? Eric, Andy, your comments on that?
Go first. Look, first, this is, number one, this is a maximum. And we are asking for substantial fee increases among the regulated community as a whole. Both to step up enforcement and to do the things that we need to do as a municipality. There also, it has to be a recognition, there is a recognition that since the last time, even the maximum rate was set in 2005, costs have increased substantially. And so there has to be some new money into the system, and we can't keep taking it out in a regulated environment. It's probably doubtful whether the dispatch companies, because this would be a dispatch-driven potential increase, would go to the maximum. It amounts to 50 cents a mile. The average trip is 5.2 miles. Okay, and that excludes the rural communities, but also if some of the outlying areas want the service or need the service, there is also an increased cost to deliver the service. And so it's, a lot of work has been put in, to look at these, and it was felt to be justified. And we would hope that the Assembly would look at that and recognize that it's a maximum and support it.
Andy?
Yeah, it's something we've wrangled with a lot, because it's with the way the system is set up today, the dispatch companies have the reins on the rates, and the dispatch companies have no skin in the game when it comes to the rates. They collect their monthly, their monthly fee, whether the rates are higher or lower, whether the drivers are making money or not making money. So we've always been sensitive. Commission's never really chimed in on the specifics of the fees and the rates, but we consistently have felt that enforcement needs to improve, and in order to do that, in the regulated environment, ultimately the user bears that cost, and if those fees are going to go up, if I know there's language about the daily lease fees, if that goes up, we got to give the driver the ability, and that's who's getting that extra money. Make no mistake about it. The driver is getting that money. We have to give the driver the ability to recoup some of the costs that they're on the hook for earlier in the game. And so I get that, where if it's per mile, it changes for the longer trips, and I don't know what the perfect formula is, but if we're going to raise the rates for the industry in these areas, we have to open the spigot for more money to come into the system, and this may or may not do that, but that's been our general consensus, just to make sure that there's new money flowing in.
Thank you. Any start?
The fuel surcharge language, I didn't go back and summarize that, but we've made changes to the fuel surcharge language in that. How does that work?
Well, I don't have the exact matrix in front of me, but we were approached, and Eric might have his memories a lot better than mine, a couple of years ago, about when the price of gas had that quick, it was up a buck and a half, and nothing really happened with it, and we kind of settled on this new normal. And so we were given the task of trying to figure out a way, in a free market environment, the rates would just go up to accommodate that. But because of the way the system works, the dispatch companies weren't making any less money, I'm just.
Well, I couldn't find it in there. Typically, fuel surcharges are benchmarked against the rack rate in LA or in the rack rate. Don't quote me in LA, but they rack rate the basis for that. So
and we had that. It was tied to the AAA fuel, the 6-month running fuel AAA price.
So this amendment references costs over and above that. So I guess the point on the protection is that they're already getting the rack rate modifications to their fuel surcharge inside their additional rate structure, right?
No. Right now, there's no fuel surcharge embedded anywhere at all in what the user is paying. So this provision would change that and would essentially protect the drivers in the event of a extreme rise in the price of gasoline.
It just doesn't, if it doesn't benchmark it, I mean, maybe I'll do more research on it before I decide, but the ideal is that you benchmark them. I notice our cabs fuel at all kinds of gas stations, so they're just pulling in when they need gas, so.
Sure.
The opportunity for that. I mean, we've got seasonally low fuel, $3.52 a gallon, for example. Does that automatically appear in their rates? I just need to know more, but.
It does not. Currently, there's no linear connection between what they're paying for gas and what the user is paying.
Here's where I get too specific. It says the purpose summary of the amendment, fares will already be increasing due to the fuel surcharge. And so I couldn't find that. Ask it a different way. Is there language in here that references fuel surcharge, and are we changing it?
Well, first, the Assembly authorized the Commission to look at and implement a surcharge 2 years ago. There is no surcharge currently in effect. As part of the ordinance that has come through, it implements a fuel surcharge.
Page 65.
Page 65,
It's on
okay.
page 65.
All right, I'll study it and decide if there's more comments. Thank you.
Johnston?
I'm just sort of reading Mr. Coffey's notes here, and I'm confused by them, and I want to make sure we haven't done, on both Amendment G and H, he said that we have some poorly written language, and it's, what the S-1 version is to cut down on the number of public hearings and still have it come to the Assembly. And I don't see where we've changed that at all, so I'm kind of confused.
It's nothing germane to this on the price per mile.
Well, it's on our amendments for the price per mile, and so I'm just wondering,
He may have cross-referenced, so I'll have to take a look at it,
Okay.
Jennifer. I haven't looked at these, I just got them in.
because, the S1 version is the same with our amendment.
Anything on this price per mile? Mr. Steele?
If it's benchmarked, do you have a floor in it, or does it go both directions in terms of and how often and what kicks it off? And so on?
Well, the commission felt that they tread carefully here. There hadn't really been a significant adjustment to what the drivers were receiving in some time. There was no real move by the dispatch companies when the price of gas rose to what it did. And so what this does is this essentially, anything less than 350, which is anything, there's a 50 cents flag drop bump immediately, and then the steps are 351 to 4, and so.
So it's in 50-cent increments, the adjustment.
Yeah, and it's 50 cents right out of the gate, automatically to account for the increased cost of the business.
Mr. Cheney?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Browski?
Proportionally, would you say the vast majority of calls come from the municipality, Anchorage proper, downtown? more urban areas, or would you say they come from the rural areas?
Complaint calls?
No, just calls in general.
It's overwhelmingly come from the municipality.
Okay, so that leads to my next question. The current rate is $2 for the first tenth of a mile, and you have another $1 you can adjust it upwards, correct? So wouldn't logic tell us that if overwhelmingly the vast majority of calls come from, let's say, downtown Anchorage, let's just say, wouldn't you gain more revenue by increasing that fare rather than focusing on the smaller number of calls that are coming from rural areas? The numbers would indicate to me you would actually generate more revenue by increasing what you're already allowed to increase versus targeting rural communities and only getting 5 cents per mile. You see where I'm going with that?
The commission, and you're absolutely right, the commission has never wanted to have its hand on the tiller with respect to what is right, what is wrong with respect to the rates. We've concentrated on the maximums, and we have hoped that the dispatch companies would work with the individual cab drivers in the industry to figure out the best formula for what they do. And so you may be absolutely right. We've never gone next level. We've been given the task to set maximums. It's actually the assembly that sets them, or we work so that we've just never looked at it from that perspective because we don't have the authority to.
And I'm looking at this like a mathematical equation. That's how I'm looking at it. And not only that is what's the ramifications on different populations. And I think the most bang we can get for our buck is like the initial flag drop. I don't think it's the price per mile. So that's why I brought this forward.
We downtown people appreciate that.
What's that?
We downtown people appreciate
Oh,
that.
you're welcome.
Well, it's not insignificant. I know your sarcasm was there, but we're actually talking about, tomorrow or whenever this passes, $1 more to every minimum fare.
Yeah. Well, and we've certainly heard from industry. They love the long trips. I mean, they do. They don't like the short trips, and this is a generalization. And so most of them are out there. The overwhelming majority are out there just taking and working whatever trip they can get, and they're happy to get it. And so if there's some fine tuning that can happen that it just makes a little more sense, and so be it.
But you wouldn't be able to maximize it by consumption, but the driver's not going to gain anything from the fuel surcharge. He drives 20 miles for one way and back 20 miles. You're only adding $1 to the maximum ability to charge more, so every flag drop that he's going to get in town, even though he's maybe going 6 blocks, he's going to get $1 on. May not even burn a gallon of gas.
Right. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to the next one then, which is Jennifer and Amy's.
Same argument, we just kept it.
Amy, anything on that?
No, the only comment, I guess yes, the only comment I would make is this will decrease or keep the lease rate for hybrid and electric or fuel efficient vehicles the same. I think in this economy and in this day and age when people are investing in those vehicles, I think it's important that the taxi cab drivers are still able to retain the same level of earnings. So I think this is just important.
Eric, Andy, comments, sir?
Yes, I have comments actually.
Yes, Dean, sorry.
Chair, I would say that this we want to keep the fuel efficient vehicle part, but on the amendment page it doesn't include that sentence. So I wonder if you meant to include everything that's stricken out on S-1, including that second sentence about it's on page 65. When permitted hybrid electric vehicle, fuel efficient vehicles operated lease rates are allowed to be no more than $15 for road maximum rates. And what you just said, it sounded like you meant to include that in the floor amendment page. Just for clarification.
charge.
there's two parts. One is the lease operator rates,
Right.
which is obviously one, and the second part is allowing a little higher rate to run the vehicle. But you didn't include that in the amendment here, but you just said that you intend to.
Okay, we'll go back and look at that one, Mr. Train.
Thank you, ma'am. Next one is I, which is one of mine. What this does, this just allows us to have 6-month permits. It reduces the price. Concerned about operators only do it in the summertime for 6 months, and don't do it around, whole year round. Just reduces their cost down to $1,050 to get a 6-month permit for some of the people in the summertime. Yes, Pat, you got that look on your face.
Yeah, we have some inkling that there's a demand for that in the market space.
I've heard there's a demand, and I want to see if there's a demand there. I think if we have this, we'll see if the people actually put the money up to do it. I've gotten some calls, some people that said it's too expensive for us to have a permit we can only use for 6 months.
How do we enforce that?
Hopefully with our 2 new inspectors we're going to hire after this, because we do have concurrence administration, if it goes through the assembly and Patrick agrees to it, we can get 2 full-time inspectors, because the problem is right now, we have 1 part-time half inspector. And you can't expect to get the job done as well with 1 half-time inspector.
Are the vehicles the point here, or is it the operator of the vehicle? So if I have a 6-month permit, how do you tell by looking at the car whether or not it's one of those?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks. The commission agrees with you, well, the commission shares your concern, but I also agree there may be room in the marketplace for a shortened permit. Our concern has always been, even if you have enforcement officers, if you have 2 more, 3 more, is there a way for that operator that is only operating from March for 6 months? It makes sense to be treated a little differently than that one that wants to operate year-round. But we've also heard from some that want to do it for 6 months and then maybe want to do a week or 2 in Ferrandi, and so how are we going to enforce those? Are they buying the 6-month permit, but they still want to do Ferrandi and maybe Christmas? AFN. So it again boils down to the enforcement and ultimately it's up to Eric and his office. That's something.
I haven't looked specifically for this, but they carry a card with them that's matched to the taxi cab permit that's placarded in the vehicle?
The vehicle for hire permit, Eric can speak better on that.
What we do annually at renewal is we issue a new sticker. So for 2014, it will be a round blue and white municipal logo, regulated vehicle permit for that year. For a seasonal operator, the receipt documentation has the timeline of the permit. And we, on the enforcement side, we want printout. So when we're in the street, we know who they are. It's few, it's only about a half a dozen that permit that right now. But we know who they are. And we're watching, we know who doesn't have a permit. And the airport, a lot of them materialize in the summer, during those months. And the airport has been very instrumental in working with us to not permit them even at the airport unless we've signed off. And we've really worked hard this year to improve that.
Yes, anything?
Why is it that we can't have a separate sticker for seasonal? Maybe a red one for summer and a blue one for winter. Vice versa.
Well, we could do that, but to print those decals are incredibly expensive, and they have a 300 permit minimum, and they run about $2.40 per sticker. And so, it's almost $1,000. It's a very high cost. So.
Okay. Well, one of the things we were just discussing is if you discuss it with the clerk's office too, I know they have some stickers that are smaller that don't cost that much. So there might be opportunity there if we think outside the box a little.
Maybe we can come up with a permit that we can use for our mobile food carts too, because I hear we're taking that issue.
Hey.
Don't mess with my cupcakes.
Yes, Andy?
Just, is there, has there been language submitted, or is there language addressing the fine that would go along with that?
I don't think there is.
Operator, you know, maybe if there's a heavy fine for the seasonal operator that's operating outside of whatever basically. But I just find, just based on his current enforcement, that office's current enforcement staffing, I can see a rogue situation where they say, let's just get the 6 month, and then we'll just, if it's.
That's part of the reason we want to increase enforcement to something realistic. Because we're asking Eric right now, and you guys on the commission, to do a job we're not giving the staff to do it, which makes no sense at all to me. Jennifer, back to you with Jay.
And we were just discussing this. Eric, you feel that this wouldn't really do anything as far as helping you raise any additional funds?
Remarkably, anything helps, you know, regardless if we, in 2013, the permit transfers have 7, I believe, as what, you know, what we've done this year.
Yeah,
So-
because that's
so
right, we
it's
get
an
paid for the stickers by the
insignificant
Like I said, make the other half for mobile food carts right there. Anything else? Okay. Moving on to K. Mr. Birch, sir. This is yours.
Well,
This is your vans.
yeah, this is basically a response to the concerns that were voiced by some in the travel industry. I serve as Mr. Hall does with the Visit Anchorage group, and there's been some concern voiced by those in the travel industry that operate vans that where they have a known clientele. They're not picking up, they're not picking up people at the airport or something. I mean, who the people are picking up are people that are prepaid for the services. So they're looking for an exemption here or whatever. They don't want to be rolled up into the taxi cab requirements for video surveillance and signage and related purposes.
Okay. Questions from assembly members? Thank you. Appreciate that. Next one is L, which is one of mine. We have a problem with discrimination. We've heard all the people that come in that have had a problem being discriminated against for whatever reason. What this will do is move the jurisdiction, so it's under Title V, I think. And Madam Clerk, you have some experience working with this, don't you?
Yes, Mr. Graney.
Step up to the plate and tell us all about it. I love the fact she's multi-talented.
Well, I will tell you that Assembly Counsel Julia Tucker drafted this, and so Julia can probably answer some questions for you. But the bottom line is this just clarifies that but both regulated vehicles and the services, permittees, chauffeurs, and dispatch companies and operators are covered by Title V. So they're regulated under Title 11. They're still covered by Title V, which is our existing code that prohibits discrimination based on all different protected classes, but of course it includes disability. So I think this might be an opportunity for the Assembly, as you're amending this code, to just take a look at things. It's just sort of like a pause so that you can take a look at things. The Equal Rights Commission already has the enforcement capability. It has the ability to do education under discrimination based on disability, so they could possibly help you out with this, and it just gives you an opportunity to pause and take a look at this before you make some real radical changes regarding the issues of disability. So that was just the suggestion that Mr. Trainee and I discussed, and again, Julia put it into language in the correct places in the proposed revisions to the code.
My thanks to both Barbara and Julia, because I think we need to address this issue. We heard from a lot of the disabled community at our Public Safety Committee meeting. I think you were there, Amy, too. And I don't really want anyone to discriminate against when it comes to calling for a cab to get from point A to point B. They have enough problems without us discriminating against them. So let's deal with this.
Can I ask you what form of discrimination takes place? I mean, if you see a taxi cab drive by somebody that has handicap requirements and they don't have a handicap permit,
If they refuse to pick up somebody that's got a manifest issue, for example, cerebral palsy or something, because we had one gentleman that they would flat refuse to pick him up, and I want to make sure that's not happening to our building, but we can't deal with every issue. But I think putting this under that will give us the ability to document patterns of discrimination if they exist and do it. So.
well, again, I mean, I'm all for making the modifications to the law, but, and I heard that testimony too, and it was moving for sure, but the other area you're working on is the handicap transportation portion of this as well. Do you have reason to believe that there's discrimination against the handicap as well?
Just anecdotal information that we hear from some people. I'd like to deal with. I think there's some stability to it. There seems to be good documentation through this vehicle. Okay. And Elbert Jackson, the next one is yours, man. I'm sorry, Chris.
Just a question on the, I know we kind of circled around on the service animals and cabs. Is that, I mean, where is that?
That's here, actually. This here. Sorry.
Here?
Yeah, I know. Here's an issue with me. This particular one would deal with the service animals because they are a protected class. You're required to pick up an individual with a service animal. And Barbara, am I correct? They are federally protected.
Well, I
And
think
she can quote chapter and verse, I think.
you've actually got some folks over here in the audience that know this better than I do, but the issue is a service animal a reasonable accommodation or to someone with a disability? And so if someone has a seeing eye dog, or even if it's a dog, there are also dogs that, or other animals that could assist someone, for example, who has a seizure disorder, and the dog could alert them prior to having a seizure. That dog assists that person. The dog needs to be able to ride in a taxi cab with him. And so this doesn't allow or disallow that. This amendment, all it does is clarify what we believe already exists, is that the cab driver needs to accommodate that person. This just clarifies that the person is entitled to file a complaint if they choose with the Equal Rights Commission. And then the Equal Rights Commission could look into it if the person refused to take them, for example, because of that dog. Now, if the dog is snarling or biting or doing its business, the cab driver has a right to refuse that fare, and then there would be a determination that that might not be illegal.
Okay, thank you. I just know we had a lot of discussion on the matter, and I had some communication with folks that, just in our general email communication with constituents.
Is the sensitivity language still in changes, Mr. Trainee?
You're supposed to be, yes. And we're going to require training. Eric? I think we're requiring training for the drivers.
We are mandating more specific training for new applicants and
renewals.
more specific at renewals, at the biannual renewal. But if I may, though, comment on that because of Mr. Birch, thank you. This also gets back to who they complain to, and part of Mr. Birch's amendment on the cameras, which we're not opposed to that part of it in the vehicle for hires. The target for the cameras really has been the cab. But we're opposed to part of his amendment that eliminates the signage on who to complain to. And even the vehicle for hires get complaints. They provide bad service. And those folks, especially in this part, need to know who to complain to. So we would just appreciate consideration when you look at that. The signage, even in many of the cabs, is very opaque. very specific where they know who to call, and we want them to know to call us if there's an issue. But we would just appreciate that, especially,
That's as apart from, and separate from the rate posting.
well, yes, aside from, yes, correct, yes, sir.
Chris, that sounds like a reasonable accommodation if we get rid of the cameras, but at least have a sign so that people do have a complaint, they know who to get a hold of. Sounds reasonable. Yes, Mr. Steele?
Just for my own knowledge, how are senile dogs or animals that are service animals, how are they identified? Does the owner have to carry a card? What's the process? If I want to take my dog down to the dog park, can I just say he's absolutely necessary?
You know, I'm going to have to tell you that you're going to have to ask somebody that's more current on the law than I am. And because the law has changed a lot in this area in the last year and a half that I have not been involved in this, and so I'm going to tell you I don't know.
Do you know how you certify a service animal?
What I can tell you right now is that there's no requirement in law for your animal to be tagged and recognized as a service animal. If you call up and say, hey, I've got my service animal and I want the cab, we have to take it at face value and let it in. And there's no,
Mr. Chairman?
no municipal requirement.
How about, if I might, I mean, this is not unique to this industry. I mean, in aviation, I mean, people travel with animals through, arguably a tighter security setup or system than we have. We might be helpful to learn, what sort, I mean, to Tim's question, how do they do it? If somebody, I don't either.
We'll find out.
They wear a little jacket.
See what happens.
Well, so if you buy a jacket, you're all right?
There's actually a market for pink jackets.
I've seen those. All right, I'll put that in.
Ms. Gray Jackson, you're the next one, and the last one.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For as long as I can remember, well, I've been on the Assembly since 2008, the discussion has been whether or not there is adequate taxi service at bar closing hours. And it's a big public safety concern. And I know, well, I heard through the grapevine that the Transportation Commission reviewed the Public Safety Limited Permit Program and didn't quite agree with it, but I've never seen anything in writing to the Assembly. So with that said, my amendment basically does two things. Number one is it asks the Transportation Commission to provide review and recommendations, number one, to determine if there is adequate taxi service during bar closing hours, whether there is or not. And then the second one is if the taxi service is inadequate, I'd like for the Transportation Commission to provide to the Assembly written review and recommendations on the Public Safety Limited Permit Program, and in addition to that, other recommendations on how to alleviate this problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from Assembly members? This is, it's our call, and
Yeah,
this passes, we just want you guys to give the information back to us.
Yeah, you bet.
So we
And
need to
it's-
know if we're meeting bar closing requirements.
Yeah, and that's been a big concern of ours, and the TI's office has done a very good job of documenting what cabs are on the road at what hours, and there's some troubling figures there.
Well, I want to thank the city manager, because I understand the signs have been changed downtown, the loading zones. They are now marked, the hours they can be used for taxi cab pickup. And George, what are the hours now for that?
Typically, a loading zone's, if it's signed, it'll say 6 to 6, something like that. And so then the taxi cabs could use it from 6 to 6. But
6 at night to 6 in the morning?
Correct. But technically speaking, if it's a loading zone, as long as the taxi is not parked there, it's a loading zone. It doesn't specify to whom, so it's loading.
Good.
Are we
Yes,
going to go
Jennifer.
back to Amendment 8?
We can if you wish.
Just to hear your response as far as adding representation on this.
Let's go back to
There's our,
A.
Amy's and mine, we would like to have somebody from the Goodwood or CDX other than non-voting, Mr. Trains, and then B was the drop-off allowing for regulated vehicles outside of the municipality to come and drop somebody off and bring them back.
Eric, Andy, on the first one?
Well, on part A, in terms of the commission, the input is a good thing. And broad representation you get is a good thing. I also know that the commission, in its existing form, has done a very good job over the, at least in the just about 3 years I've been associated with it, and looking at issues, whether it's in a limited nature or as a municipality as a whole, and it has just done a tremendous job at working through and wading through the issues and going. And so I think
Two new members, equally as good, will only add to it.
Get your answer you wanted,
Yes,
Jennifer?
and then as far as the Amendment B, which is being able to bring somebody from outside, like the valley, or from, if there is a permit for Chugach, Eagle River, or Girdwood, where they're able to drive into town to the airport, can they bring that person back? And that was Amendment B, and I noticed there were concerns on how it was written.
Well, regarding Amendment B, first, if a trip originated in Girdwood, they're within the municipality, and so they should have been in a regulated vehicle anyway. Regarding out-of-district vehicles, even if I have 2 full-time code enforcers, we can't, the way we have to enforce is we have to document. If they're gonna come in and we get a complaint and we get them ready rides, they willfully decline to permit in the municipality. So they move the entire operation to the valley, yet come in frequently and operate within the municipality. But we have to be able to enforce, we have to devote staff and resources to following them. We have to follow them all around town once they're picked up, including, documenting every stop they make and what they do, and then going back out. So we have to follow them all the way to the including exit, at the end of the municipality. And even with 2 additional staff, we wouldn't have the resources to devote to that. If we want to do business in Anchorage, we should have a permit to do business in Anchorage. If we have no objection to anybody out of district, Kenai cabs come in and they bring people to Providence, and they do it, and then they leave. And they go home, and folks from the valley bring in their residents to the airport, and they turn around and leave. And in some cases, valley cabs will bring them in to America, and they turn around and leave. For them to be eligible for this, they have to keep their meter running. That what we consider a round trip. They come in, they're paying the driver for wait time, they're keeping, the meter running. And from an enforcement perspective, it really is just. It shouldn't happen, and if we're going to do that, they should have a permit to do business in Anchorage.
I guess I'm also taking another step. If there is, and there's always been talk of having a permit, a Girdwood-centric permit or a Chugach Eagle River-centric permit, and I see where this would maybe apply to that too. I don't know if that's something we should address now, or we wait till we get those Girdwood or Chugach Eagle River permits.
Well, this ordinance, for the first time, is one of the things we pushed for, to look at those little geographic areas like Chugach or Girdwood. We needed some revisions that are now in the ordinance to issue those permits. And the commission intends to go really full speed in short order, to look at that and put at least 2 or 3 cabs in the Chugach Eagle River area. We've been in communication with the gentleman in Girdwood that wants to run a little local operation down there and do things that the commission has been very open to looking at and authorizing, to do. But this doesn't apply to that. This applies to out-of-district operators that want to come in and operate in Anchorage. And we're not opposed to them bringing in that patron and dropping them off and then being out. And if they want to need another cab to get home with us and want us, they call. They call a cab.
What is Ready Ride?
Ready Rides, I think the current assembly, y'all are probably a little more familiar with the other outfit. I forget. Ready Rides was trying to skirt the permitting requirements to provide Medicaid-type transportation vouchers and run folks around town to doctor's appointments and, to the senior centers and all that, both for cash and by taking vouchers. Prior to my taking over, legal was very involved and determining that they were required to have permits. And they were cited for operating without permits. But rather than permit themselves, they chose to do everything outside of the jurisdiction of the municipality. Just take it to the ballot.
But they're still driving in
But they
Anchorage.
still drive in Anchorage, and they still operate here.
How many are we talking about a day? Any idea?
Well, they were running 5 vehicles. So it's 10,000 permit fees to the municipality that they're not paying. By going out.
Steele?
Yeah, I was hoping that that this iteration, we would come up with it, but we haven't, in terms of discussions with the valley. I've been in other jurisdictions where they have an airport service, where they have a fixed route. They come in from outside, maybe stop off in town, I would think, something like the university, the airport, that type of, the hospital, the airport or whatever, and then turn around and go back the same route. Scheduled route, fixed rate for folks. They operate with a phone call. They say, somebody says, I'm coming in Anchorage at 1 in the morning. Is there an airport service? Can I get on the next bus? Whatever it is. And I don't know if we have that capability now, or if that's something that would cause havoc, or whether it's something that might improve public transportation. I guess I'm.
Yes, Andy.
Well, yeah, if you want to comment on Mr. Steele, I was going to comment on
We actually have a current operator that runs within Anchorage somewhat of a shuttle between the airport and the major hotels downtown. And we've had others that have tried that, to run a shuttle, like a scheduled shuttle to come in. And for the marketing reason, it just hasn't worked.
Did we require them to have a permit?
Well, what they do is under both the amended ordinance and current ordinance, they're required to just bring their plan to the commission and let the commission look at it. And the commission could approve it or modify it, or let them operate or something.
Okay.
Within the plan.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Thank you. Mr. Trainee, in an effort not to surprise anyone, we had a slight oversight when we were drafting this, because though we wanted round trips to be able to come from Matsu if necessary, we had also intended for round trips to be allowable from Chugiak, Eagle River, Girdwood areas if those designated areas get their own taxi cabs. So I will be bringing forward an amendment to this amendment just to insert one quick little sentence to say designated areas such as Chugiak, Eagle River, and Girdwood to encompass all of them tomorrow night.
You get that look on your face, Eric?
Well, because I'm not sure if they're within the municipality, it's even necessary because they're operating
I don't
within
think
the
they've got a
municipality.
permit within the municipality of Anchorage,
Well,
which
Mr.
includes the River Chugiak.
But one of the concerns with Chugiak, Eagle River, and Girdwood is that they get a site-centric permit. And then it's a question whether they can, if they bring somebody into the airport, whether they can take somebody back out to Girdwood or back out to Eagle River from the airport, or do they have to just go back empty?
Eric?
The current answer is empty.
And I have to tell you, that would become a matter of policy. But I think from, the commission heard months and months and months of testimony on limited permits, within that area. And what I can, I guess probably what I've seen in 3 years on the enforcement side, can assure you that if if the commission authorizes limited permits to serve the Chugach Eagle River community, allow them to bring a fare into Anchorage, whether it's anywhere, to the airport, and then go get in that queue line and take somebody back out there, you're not gonna have a cab in Chugach Eagle River, and you're not gonna have a cab in Goodwood. And so what happens is when the next person calls and wants the cab, it isn't there. And you can't, the testimony was just overwhelming at all levels, from an operator level to even the vehicle owner, to even some of the permit owners, and right up to the dispatch companies. And so they have to be, it seems to be, that they need to discharge the passenger and go back to where the permit's been issued. But I know the commission, I can't speak for the commission, I know the independent great folks that look at these things, and I know it's been a topic for much of the last 15 months as we've gotten there.
I've got Tim and then Bill.
Yeah, if you have to keep your meter running, that's not gonna work either, because if you drop somebody off at a doctor's appointment, it takes an hour or more, and you got the meter clicking away, that's not gonna work either, so. We need to find the incentives that are gonna work.
Well, one of them is a fixed rate, an allowable fixed rate, non-hourly for a van or an executive car to move in those zones so that they're covered on their cost of running a trip. Right now, they have to charge an hourly rate as opposed to a fixed rate, is that correct? So if I call up an executive town car and says, pick me up in Eagle River, take me to the airport, he's gonna say, well, that's about, such and such. Instead of saying it's gonna be $75, he has to give me an hourly rate. So what about the friction with a fixed rate to allow that? We've had that gentleman that's been trying to do that. Has that been his point of contention, is he wants to charge a flat rate per person kind of concept? And what would be wrong with that under your limousine clause?
Well, under the limousine vehicle restriction, there's nothing wrong with it if they do that.
They charge hourly though.
Well, they do charge that.
Yeah, but my point is, why couldn't they charge per person fixed and satisfy the market that exists for that?
And this talk of the airport has been prevalent when we discuss the other areas, the potentially underserved areas. How do we keep these vehicles, how do we keep whatever vehicles we come up with, whether it's the vehicle for hires or special cabs, or the permit owners have a plan to potentially repaint. Eagle River already has an airport.
Well, let's get off Eagle River. Let's go to Girdwood. You go to Utah right now, you get yourself a ski van that takes you to Snowbird or to Alta. We don't have a ski van that's fixed. So if somebody's trying to book Alyeska, they have to do an hourly rate, and there's no mechanism for that. So if we use the ability to buy the van, $75, each person's $25 on top of that. What's the angst on that?
I couldn't comment if there would be, I'm not sure. Yeah, that's first we've been proposal, if we've heard something like that.
Anything else, Mr. Stern?
Other than I have another topic.
Another taxing topic?
Another question about the change.
Go ahead, sir.
Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, because we're about to wrap this thing up, so.
I thought we were going till 2.
Well, as soon as we're done with our comments, Mr. Stern, if we go to 2, we go to 2.
The background check requirement to go to public safety and get a summary of, I don't know what you're trying to do with that. Who made the change to the background check requirement? You don't specify what background is detrimental. And so you're asking them to decide that if they're if they had a domestic violence charge when they were 20, 21, and now they're 40. I guess why are you asking them to do a background check?
Because far too often what we find is people come to Alaska and try to escape what they did in the lower 48. I want to make sure we have drivers that we feel are able to take your constituents from point A to point B and not put them behind somebody that was on a murder charge down in Louisiana and decides to start a new life in Alaska. We don't do a complete background check. That's what's got us having, how many cases have you had where you've had a sexual offender ends up coming out here and driving? It's only later when you do a background check on him, you find out you've got crimes in Lower 48.
Well, we had 2 recent ones.
I get that concept, but there's nothing in your change that specifies that you deny that person a permit for that violation, though, is the way I read it. Is that true?
Eric?
It's arbitrary that you, because he's got an unsafe driving charge, you wouldn't give him a chauffeur's license.
Or no, they have to be otherwise eligible, too. So
I get that part.
the background check uses that, so they can't have any felony or misdemeanor anywhere, that involves the threat of a person. They can't have a conviction of forgery, theft, embezzlement, fraud, within 5 years. Those defined parameters remain. They're in existing code, and they can't have any conviction for a sex-related crime, period, in any jurisdiction.
So the new language in here that does that, is it just put the burden of the report then on the applicant, or what's the change in the language that's being proposed?
With the current language, we work with legal on this quite a bit. And what it does is it requires, under existing ordinance, to go to people, here's my driver's license, that they could have gotten yesterday. And they get a name-based background check. That's it. And it's limited here. You can't access, the national system. This change requires them to go down to the same one the school district uses, one of the to get a fingerprint-based check that's fed into the national system with the report delivered to us. So it greatly expands that background check, into the national realm. So we get a better look at it.
I'm just worried about you having an arbitrary decision whether that person's qualified based on what you see in that report. That's all. I like the quantified ones. I employ drivers myself. Those are very quantifiable. Every driver that's going to apply knows that. But there's other things that could show up in the report that may not.
Well, we don't, and actually, existing was very clear. It's on 1130-040, when we issue a license, they can't have a moving violation that resulted in a suspension of 12 months, a conviction for reckless driving, or driving while license suspended revoked, within 12 months. They also can't have a felony or misdemeanor within 5 years for prostitution, or solicitation, or sale, transportation, possession of controlled substance, felonies or misdemeanors. It's very clear. It's very clear in code of what we would deny the license for, and we could only deny.
Okay, well, I'll ask you a question offline. Basically, the change on page 49 is what I'm after. What does that do? It gives you a recency of report.
It just expands it to nationally, because right now we can't see, and we have a whole lot of applicants that have come up from other states and they come up because they've been convicted of a crime, and sometimes a serious.
I know that happens. Is there any mechanism in place that sort of pulls their license if they're currently licensed and then have an altercation somewhere? I always got caught by the DUIs that occurred. The guys were driving for me and they had a DUI 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they never said it to anybody. And there's no mechanism unless they come forward and say that they had a DUI that you could ever catch it.
That's correct, and this doesn't either, unless they apply for a commercial license or something. Because all 50 states yet don't participate in that license sharing information. And so we monitor at renewals. We look at the driving record even here.
But you may want to look at an annual requirement, because a guy could have a chauffeur's license for 3 or 4 years and have multiple violations. All right.
Because we've had numerous problems, and when we look back on some of these drivers, we find they had problems in other states before they came here. We're just trying to expand the search, because I don't want to read about it in the paper later. And then we get the calls from people, why didn't you guys know this person had this offense in this other state? I want Eric to be able to find that out when the inspection of the person is done, before we read it in the paper later.
good goal, but it's expensive. It's going to be a burdensome requirement on the industry that's trying to get new drivers to take up.
I know, but sometimes you have to have a burden to make the system work safe. Look at TSA, and those, we don't want to go through that here on Taxicab. Anyway. What we're going to do tomorrow is we'll take all these amendments up, vote them yes or down, then we'll go to the main motion, vote it yes or down. We'll move on from there. Thanks for being here. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we end the meeting, and I know we were scheduled to 2 o'clock, but we have a bunch of stakeholders in the audience, and I just think that since we have a little bit of time, it might be really appropriate to allow anybody who wants to make a comment based on what they've heard here this afternoon, and I hope that you're allowing my request, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to limit you to 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I'll need your time. Yes, ma'am. I know it's unusual.
Could you please state your name for the record and what organization you represent?
I'm Jackie Ransom. I currently hold a contract for the city for new chauffeur training. I also lease and run 3 taxi cabs with my husband. My husband is a current driver. I ran operated checker cab dispatch in the past for 4 or 5 years, so I'm familiar with from the bottom all the way up to the top at all levels of the taxi. I would suggest with all the changes that you put into this, and all the time, I recognize all the time and effort everybody has done, but it is still up in the air of each and every one of you, the impact you're going to make on our industry. It's a major, major impact. You think that doubling all the fees, all those fees are doubled or whatever to get more enforcement, but there's no money coming in at the bottom. Any job worth having has to have economics, and you're going to end up with $5 an hour people that can't speak English driving these cabs. Nobody's going to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for no money. Right now, the surcharge was a way to get around the dispatch. The dispatch won't raise the rates that the Assembly gave in 2005 to the drivers so we can be economically safe or feasible and competitive with other industries. The only reason that surcharge was there is to get around the dispatches, because the dispatch will not put the money into the system. Now you're taking out hundreds of dollars at the top, and you're worried about the flag drop and the mileage fee. It's not going to happen. The surcharge was going to be a force. That you give the raises for the drivers, the dispatch doesn't have to take it. You put in language, that's the maximum. The dispatch is going to keep it right where it's at. Those drivers are not making any money. They get no wages, they get no insurance, they get no anything. No sick leave, no anything. They're worse, to me, they're worse than Walmart as an employer. They're self-employed. If you don't make some mandated things on the dispatch, it doesn't matter about the money. You're just taking it out, and your industry as a whole is going to collapse. The ADA, I teach ADA and the new chauffeurs, we go overboard and say, you have to take an animal. If you can't take an animal, and all that passenger has to do is request, say, this is my service animal. There's no cards, there's no anything. If you can't do that, or you're allergic, maybe this isn't the job for you. The dispatch has no requirement to teach anything. Under Title V, maybe, but everybody thinks the dispatch, all they do is do our billing and dispatch radio calls. The major dispatch puts everybody on timeout after they refuse 8 calls. So at the end of the day, half the drivers are in timeout.
She has a question for you, Judge. Tim,
Oh.
what's your fix?
What's that?
Specifically.
The mileage rate and the flag drop both need to be raised, because that money needs to come in. Eric did a study nationwide. We're some of the lowest in the rates of all the cities. We have the lowest rates. Even the bus system raised their rates, and they're for nonprofit. We are for profit.
How much more do you think has to be recovered in a rate increase or a flag drop rate?
I think the flag drop should be a minimum of $3. That was 2005, the assembly gave the right to do that. The dispatch won't do it. I think the mileage should go up to $3, whatever portion it is. And I think the wait time should go up to $50. I really do. Because if you don't put wait time to 50, if you don't make it a job worth having, nobody's going to drive. Sitting in, we lost a driver. He got attacked by 3 Samoans, lost his eye, and you don't hear anything about any of that. I'm worried about drunks.
Go ahead, Chairman. Can I just quickly apologize to everybody? I have to go to work, so I have to leave. I apologize. I'm not leaving since you guys are talking. I just wanted to say that.
Yes, well, Dave O'Malley. I just want to say, the lease a permit right now is $1,600 a month. That's what most drivers are paying. $1,600 per cab is a lot of money. It should be about $600. So when you talk about increasing more money coming to the city to pay fees, it should come out of that $1,600. And the daily lease rates are basically the only thing keeping prices of permits, prices of leases from going through the roof. If you increase these daily taxi cab leases for drivers, they're going to increase, they're going to tell the drivers, you're going to have to pay twice that during permanent fund time, during AFN, Friday nights. It just gives them too much leeway. And this whole idea about picking up round trips is ridiculous. It's illusionary. No cab who has an Eagle River permit is going to make money sitting outside the Capitol Cook. They'll lose money. You sit outside the Capitol Cook for an hour, you get a $3 fare. It would make much more sense to go out and pick up a $70 fare from Eagle River. Any Eagle River cab or any should be a city permit, and they should have equal rights. So that's another whole thing to take later on. But right now, to keep artificial inflation from going through the roof, this is the only seal we have, this taxi cab for daily leases. That's very important. Without this, it could be abused to a point of saying, you pay this tonight, you pay this, you don't, and they don't need that extra. So just for inflation-wide, artificial inflation, keeping everything on a limit. Right now, $91,000 for non-transferable permit is through the roof too. It should be a lot lower than that, and that's money we can work on to pay municipality increase. And you also need to really look in Department of Transportation Inspector. Sometimes half the day, more than that, is just doing these little meter runs. It makes no sense for the Transportation Commission inspector or his assistant to spend half the day running a half mile on a taxi looking at a meter. That should be done during the inspections. Every time you have an inspection, you got to do this taxi run. A lot of what he does should be sent to private industry or the dispatch companies or the criminals themselves or the cab owners themselves. These just to be looked on. There's a lot of ridiculous waste of time and money. Every other, just like DMV, everybody just cut back on a lot of the wasteful things they do. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name's Jeff McDaniel. I've been right to you guys. You know the main issue. We're dancing all around it, but the problem that brought you all together is things going on within dispatch companies. And I kind of wish Amy had stayed, because Eagle River will never be solved until they flatten out the dispatch and don't let them just pick what they want to do and throw it in the car by dollars. They do it by the proximity of the cab. Someone had the courage to put that in there. All you need to do is add teeth to that and give Eric the authority to police it, and you can straighten out most of the problems in this industry. The cap on the things, you do have to hold it down, but not because there's not so much money in the industry, is the money doesn't get out across the board to all the drivers. Susie and them run 30 cars, I don't know. They haven't had a raise in about 10 years. You have to understand the time value of money, the way they've increased our money supply, you've taken their margins down to nothing, and it's going to fall to where the good operators are going to go out of the business, because it isn't worth trying to maintain a car if they can't charge enough to keep it on the road and make a little profit. The problem is equitable dispatch. And you asked the right question, how do you solve it? You tell him to write a report on it. You guys are going to spend $175,000 to do a report on some computer rip-off they've got going on, He's not free, but he's already available, and it doesn't cost anything. Let him write a report. All he's got to do is pull a month's worth of dispatches from a couple of months ago, pull the driver sheets from those exact same times, take it, see how much the dollar average is going into each car. And when you find certain cars making hundreds of % more than other cars, which is the situation, you come up with a solution to stop it, which is make them dispatch by proximity and put escalating fines if they don't do it. There's people behind the scenes here that hold all this down. They don't want you to fix dispatch. You are here having this whole rewrite because of stuff going on in dispatch. So it's there in front of you. And like I say, there does need to be more money in the industry, but you can't just arbitrarily raise the rates because you've got all these competing forces between the handicap companies. You guys are all smart. You know it, you know it, you know. I can look in your eyes. You guys got processors. Turn them on and fix this industry. I love driving the cab. As soon as you point out the problems with it, you're not welcome to be driving the cab. So you're going to lose the good people. You're going to lose from the good car operators, the good drivers. You're going to end up with a larcenous bunch down there. You're talking about, when you said special interest, a very finite special interest group. I realize the permit owners are only 70, 80 people, and they have their interest, and they pay and they're represented, and that's okay. I mean, I understand it. But the dispatch companies is a way finite group, half a dozen people, and it's just incredibly screwed up. I mean, go drive a cab. You'll jump out of that car and you'll never get back in it. Because you sit around in parking lots waiting for crappy little trips while other cars are bouncing up and down the highway making $300-400 a day. You're lucky if you can get enough money for chicken, a beer, and gas and go home. So I mean, the problem is dispatch. He can research it. He has all the tools. Brent pulled a disc at like 170-some thousand dispatches. You lay that against the trip sheets. Anybody can reconcile that mess. Okay? I talk fast. I told you. Thank you.
Thanks for this opportunity. I'm Susie Smith. I'm a permit operator, and I have to agree with the dispatch discussion because they are the mechanism that kind of holds everybody together. They're the ones that drive the rates. I mean, as you've been informed today, some of the rates were, the last rate increase was in 2005, and yet they still have not gone to that max rate. Now in 2005, they thought that max rate was okay to set in force at that day. That means we're talking about 8-year-old rates already. And the two small things that are on here for rate increases, the fuel surcharge and the mileage one, were just ways for us to maybe go around that. The fuel surcharge being one of them as a way to get around dispatch. The other, the mileage, was just another attribute that we thought the dispatch would buy into, being that it wasn't the flag drop as their main number that you look at. It was a buy-in tool for them to say, okay, maybe we'll go that route, and that would give some more money into these drivers. The bottom line is, yes, you guys we're expecting a bunch of increase for operators and owners, but no money coming in, and I'm very discouraged by that. I want to quickly jump back into the vehicles coming out of district and picking up. That's an enforcement nightmare, and there is no way we can expect a Eagle River or Girdwood, whatever permits end up transpiring, those permits to then go back to Eagle River and service that community. They're going to have every excuse under the sun, and if you don't mandate it as a that equation's never going to work. There is no way. There's more business in Anchorage. That's why they're there. That's why you don't see them just sitting out in Eagle River. They could go sit out in Eagle River all day long every day. There's nothing to say they couldn't. It's the fact that the call volume is not projecting them to go out there. And then the other is the daily lease rate. And there again, same thing. The daily lease rate was capped in 2005, okay? That rate was capped in 2005, but it was a rate I was charging in 2001. I'm charging the same rate I charged my drivers in 2001 as I am today. And we're trying to, and in September of 2012, we finally got the commission after about 4 or 5 times going above the commission with not anecdotal, but real life receipts showing our increases and what the expenses had gone up in our industry. Time and time again turned down. Finally last year, we were granted, okay, yes, this industry needs some relief. The commission agreed on it. They approved it September 2012. We still have not seen it because what happened was it needed your guys' approval. I don't know where it sat, sitting on some desk somewhere, I don't know. But then this all transpired, so nothing's come about that increase. What I want you guys to recognize is that even though that cap was in 2005 and the rate I had charged was still from 2001, that rate was never abused. The market created its own max. Drivers, if I charge too much, I wouldn't have drivers to drive my cars. The market maintained its own ceiling. They didn't need somebody to dictate it. And what it's done now is created this, it's created, quite honestly, a devastating industry for us. My insurance just from the last 4 years went up 36%, just in the last 4 years. I mean, these are numbers that we're not trying to be greedy. We are literally screaming for help. I know drivers don't want to pay more. I know they need more money. I mean, it's an all-time thing. They need more money. The industry needs more money. And we need help from you guys.
Real quick, my name is Bob Ransom. I sent you all an email this morning, so check the email. It talks about the dispatching rates. And I'd just like to talk about this Amendment J. It's going to double the fee. I think Ms. Johnson brought that up. That from 500 to 1,000 to renew the permit. I think 750 would be a sufficient amount to increase it. It doesn't have to be increased at all. But check your email, and I'm on board like everybody says. The dispatch needs to be mandated to do things, and it hasn't been in all these years. So that the root of most of the problems really is. Even sending cars out to the outlying areas, they randomly do that. I really urge you guys to do something about that. There's a person at Yellow Cab, the manager. She thinks she's the czar of the taxi industry. They have the lion's share of the business. They have 140 cabs compared to the other company, and they control what goes on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I think you're the final.
Thank you. Patrick Reinhardt with the Governor's Council on Disabilities and Special Education. I want to first say thank you for the dialogue that has occurred back and forth with this ordinance. You've heard from several of us many times about the issues related to the cabs. Actually, the ones that say they're accessible are accessible. The biggest issue of all, the whole discrimination issue. I appreciate the effort of getting the Equal Rights Commission involved in this, because that's probably the most major issue that we hear about and that you guys have heard about. And I will tell you right now, and we've said it all along, that you just don't allow somebody to discriminate against somebody by not picking them up. I mean, you wouldn't allow it if somebody was a different color. You wouldn't be allowed to operate if you did that. And if you do that for somebody with a disability, not picking them up because they have a service animal, which is vague in some instances, but you got to take it at face value, or they're in a wheelchair because it's just too darn difficult to pick them up. I mean, that's a serious offense as far as we're concerned, and people should be punished for it or not be in the business at all if that's how they're going to operate. So any effort to eliminate discrimination with people with disabilities in this industry is very much appreciated. I will say in reference to A1 and A, the amendments, ex officio versus a voting member. Ex officio, we can come to any meeting and probably talk and say what we want to say, but having a vote in something as important as this is probably much more preferable from our perspective. And I really appreciate amendments F in terms of the reporting and L. That's all I'd say. Thank you.
I had a question. We had some very compelling testimony from a gentleman. I think he had cerebral palsy, and he actually had to have a person assistant when he testified in front of the assembly. I can't imagine. I don't know if that person travels with an attendant all the time or not. But I mean, it seems to me like if a cab driver showed up at 11 o'clock at night and saw this person unaccompanied, that they might not know what to expect. And I guess my question is, how much notice does a cab operator have typically that someone is handicapped? Because obviously, a wheelchair, for instance, I mean, you're either wrestling somebody around or you get a lift rig or something. What's been your experience? And I know it's maybe.
Well, you shouldn't be required to provide any kind of notice unless you need a lift-equipped vehicle. The bottom line is, I mean, if you refuse to pick that person up, you're discriminating. The whole thing about education, awareness is why we brought it up, and why it's important is because, the average person isn't going to know what's appropriate in terms of what they're seeing or the communication. There's a lot of stuff going on with people with disabilities where you might mistake one disability as being drunk. I mean, you're not going to know the difference. And so you just can't assume, and that's where the training and awareness really comes in, and the importance of making sure that these drivers get some kind of awareness training, that they're just not making assumptions that are based in any kind of reality.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm good. I'd like the assembly members to stand by. I'm going to take care of it. Getting you out of here virtually at 1, 2 o'clock. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting. If you'll give me just a second, I'm going to have Deanna give you a report.
Eric. Over here, Eric.
Yeah, I just, thank you.
Thank you.
I just, I think that's their concern.
It'll be over soon.
And we're,
Eric said, oh,
okay, well, why we help?
I mean, unless you need a lift, we really shouldn't have to say anything.
I guess the literature I got from they have to express their needs, so maybe we need to sit down and talk. I would love to sit down and talk. Yeah, we brought up some different issues. When I got there, that's what we need to want. What we're trying to say is, yeah, there's a lot of each facility is a really good one. That's why I want to go back to
I want to get you out of here.
Right.
If I get the assembly members to come back to the table.
So it's kind of
And ask that everybody else either be seated or hold down.
you know, when we call up and say, hey, we need to yeah, that's uncomfortable.
Are you in charge?
Okay. No, I'm trying to have another
I need everyone else to sit down and be quiet or leave the room.
thanks, Andy, very much. Yeah, you're going tomorrow night.
Oh, yeah, I got to, it's mandatory.
And that's going to be 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock.
For the record, I'd like to make sure that everybody understands
Want to thank you.
we're doing now, but we're going to do it again at 2. If there's nobody here, that's okay, but we're doing it again at 2. because that's
The only
what
person
was
that'll be
noticed.
required at 2 o'clock is me, so. With that, yes. We'll go around and do introductions. Ernie Hall, Assembly.
Big training assembly.
Elby Green Jackson.
Tim Steele.
Jennifer Johnson.
Ms. Birch.
Deanna's Department of Law.
And Ms. Tucker is with us as well. Ms. Ennis.
And just, at 2 o'clock, both the successful and unsuccessful bidder would be here if you had any questions. But here, to allow for your schedule to ask a little early, this was a $1.2 million indigent defense contract. Bids went out, or proposals, excuse me, went out. There was one, Denali Law Group was the successful proposer in terms of the evaluation. The other law firm, the unsuccessful, Gordon Lowe, put in a bid protest. The Assembly referred it over to the bidding review board. The bidding review board did meet and upheld, or was going to recommend that the Assembly approve that contract, or approve the award. Okay. In the meantime, everybody has been a global settlement of a number of issues. And when I say that, both the 2 law firms and the Department of Law, because one of the issues is there's a couple of hundred cases out there that Gordon Lowe would theoretically still be on the hook for, both contractually and ethically as attorneys. Well, it's in no one's best interest to have a law firm handling cases that go 3 years out, because there's a lot of monitoring, wellness courts, that type of thing. And so this settlement has to be a sort of an exchange that they're going to all cooperate in the transition, work with the judges. The 2 firms are going to cooperate in exchange. That other firm, the successful proposal, Denali, will be taking over some of those, will be taking over the majority of those lawsuits. so we'll provide coverage.
Mr. Train?
They don't have an office here in Anchorage, I
Not
understand.
yet.
When are they going to hire one? Before we give them the contract or after we give the contract?
They would do it the day they know the assembly approves. They've looked at space.
I understand the bid when it went out required them to have so many attorneys under hire, and they don't have the
It did not.
amount.
It did not.
So they could have only had one under hire?
Theoretically.
Was there a requirement for the contract for them to submit the type of cases that their lawyers had worked on in the past?
Not specifically, but they do the comparable contract for the valley.
Okay.
So it didn't say that, but this is in fact what they do in that city. All of the attorneys from that, the three principals, practice in Anchorage as well.
Okay.
So they're familiar with the Anchorage court system.
So they'll be able to, I think we have, how many courts do we use here in Anchorage with our indigent defense? 3 of them, or how
Oh,
many?
it's district court, primarily, just about all district court, but there's little courts within that court, so you'll hear about wellness court, and you'll hear about the mental health court. That's just a courtroom within the court.
Okay. How many attorneys are they going to have handling our indigent defense? I just want to make sure that they've got the ability to handle all of our indigent defense requirements.
Right now, they have 3, but they have every intention of staffing up. In fact, part of the negotiations is they're now going to meet with some of the Gordon and Low attorneys. Because again, the idea is that some of those attorneys will now come over to this.
If we approve this contract, by what date will they have the attorneys hired? I don't want it to be a promise, we'll do it eventually. I want to know a date.
Well,
by
now
which
under
they have
this settlement, because you see, initially how this went out, they would only have the 2014 cases, and they'd have some period of time to staff up. Now under this, they're going to start taking the Gordon Low cases as of January 1st, so they're going to have to staff up right away.
We haven't had any time requirements for the staffing, just that they're going to do it.
Right.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions?
I guess, do you mind, Mr.?
No, go ahead.
Service? Okay. I think that it's sort of common practice in the city that the successful bidder will in fact take some of the employees of the unsuccessful bidder, but that's how it's done, and that's what both the successful and unsuccessful bidder entertain these case. In fact, that's where they're really talking shop, because they want to see those people come over and be part of the successful bidder's team.
So in a lot of respects, it's just project management. You switch from one project manager to another project manager.
In many ways.
Any other questions? Comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarity, okay? So, the 2 firms, the successful bidder is going to be hiring staff, if you will, from the losing bidder?
Likely, yes.
Okay.
We anticipate.
Okay. And that usually happens, you said?
Yes, very common.
Really? I didn't know that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Tucker?
Did you mention when the current contract is due to expire?
December 31st this year. So we had put it out about 3 months ago, 4 months, anticipating that we need and it's very critical that this goes through. And the reason why is, as of December 31st, if we don't have an indigent defense firm, we can't prosecute through the city. Those tickets, and it's misdemeanors, these are all misdemeanors, would have to go through the state. So the state would have to, our police officers would have to write it through state statutes. The whole system would switch temporarily over to the state, which would be a fiasco. So we're sort of on a very quick timeline. We need to get this through. We had thought starting this in August would be enough. We didn't anticipate this protracted bid protest.
When they write tickets on the state, where do the revenues for those tickets go?
Exactly, it goes to the state. All the fees and fines go to the state, and we lose that revenue source.
Anyone else? We're adjourned.